Okay, Chapter 4, New Beginnings. After the effects of the trial had worn off, my insides became numb. I fully realized that Mother could not physically harm me, but I still felt an eerie sensation that told me Mother was somewhere out there, coiled like a rattlesnake, waiting to reach out and strike with a vengeance. But another part of me felt that I would never see Mother or my brothers again. I became confused, sensing that I didn't deserve to live with them, that I was unworthy, and that Mother had thrown me away. I tried my best to tell myself that through the wonder of the county's social services and the court system, I had a new lease on my life. I tried my best to isolate my past, to bury my dark experiences deep inside my heart. Page 80. Like a light switch, I imagined myself flicking off my entire past. I quickly became accustomed to the routine at Aunt Mary's home, as well as to my new school. And even though I was spontaneous and free at Aunt Mary's, I still became lifeless and shy around my classmates. It seemed difficult for me to make friends. I stood out, especially whenever children asked why I didn't live with my parents. And whenever some of my classmates persisted, I shuddered and stuttered and turned away. I couldn't look into their eyes. Other times I'd happily state, I'm a foster child. I was proud to be a member of my new family. I began to repeat this saying until one day, one of the older foster children pulled me aside at school, warning me not to tell anyone what I was, because a lot of folks don't like our kind. Our kind? What are you talking about? I asked. We didn't do anything wrong. Don't worry, little brother. You'll find out soon enough. Just be cool and keep your mouth shut. I obeyed the command, realizing I now lived in another world of prejudice. During recess, I watched the other kids laugh as they played tag and handball, while I kept to myself and wandered around the school in a daze. No matter how hard I tried, my mind kept flashing back to my other school in Daly City. I thought of Mr. Ziegler and his animated happy-faced sons, which he would draw on my papers, Mrs. Woodward's dreaded spelling test, or running to the library where Mrs. Howell played Octopus Garden by the Beatles on her record player. In my new school, I had completely lost interest. I no longer absorbed my subjects as I had just a few weeks ago. I sat behind the gray, steel desk, half dazed, scribbling on my papers, counting down the minutes until the end of the school day. What was once my sanctuary soon became a prison that kept me from my playtime at my foster home. As my attention span drifted, my handwriting, once cursive and graceful, became chicken scratch. At Aunt Mary's, my awkward sense of humor and naive excitability made me popular with the older foster children. Whenever some of them were granted permission to leave Mary's home for the afternoon, I was allowed to tag along. Sometimes they stole candy bars from the local grocery stores. Wanting total acceptance and having already stolen food for years, I immediately followed their lead. If someone stole 2 candy bars, I stole 4. Page 82. It seemed so easy to me that after a few afternoon trips, I became a legend within the group. I was fully aware that what I was doing was wrong, and I also knew that some of the bigger boys were using me, but I didn't care. After years of isolation, I was finally accepted within a group. My stealing was done within the foster home as well. Waiting until everyone was outside, I'd sneak into the kitchen, take slices of bread, and stash them under my pillow. Then late at night, I'd sit up on my bed and nibble on my prize, like a mouse nibbling on a piece of cheese. One Sunday afternoon, I grew tired of bread and decided to steal Dolly Madison cupcakes from the freezer. In the early morning hours, I awoke to find an army of ants leading to the head of my bed. As quickly and as quietly as I could, I tiptoed to the bathroom and flushed my goodies along with the ants down the toilet. The next day, as Aunt Mary prepared our lunches for school, she discovered the missing desserts and blamed Teresa, one of the other foster children. And even though Teresa was severely scolded and grounded to her room after school that day, I remained silent. I didn't steal from Aunt Mary's home for the thrill of it, but only to have a ready-made storage of food in case I ever became hungry. Page 83. It didn't take long for Aunt Mary to discover that I was the one responsible for the missing food. From that moment on, Aunt Mary eyed me carefully around her home and did her best to restrict my afternoon adventures. At first, I felt ashamed because I had betrayed her trust and kindness. But on the other hand, I simply didn't care what old maid Aunt Mary thought of me. My only concern was total acceptance by the older foster children. My welcome at Aunt Mary's was probably worn out even before the first week of July, when I was placed in my first permanent foster home. And just as before, when the police officer had driven me to Aunt Mary's for the first time, I couldn't wait to see the new home. My new foster mother, Lillian Catans, greeted Miss Gold and me at the door, and as I followed Miss Catans and Miss Gold up the wide open stairs that led into the living room, I tightly clutched a brown grocery bag containing all my worldly possessions. The night before, I made sure to pack my bag and keep it close to my side. I knew from experience that if I left anything behind, I would never see it again. I was shocked when I first witnessed the foster children who transformed into frenzied piranhas whenever a child left Aunt Mary's home. Page 84. Within a second of the child's departure, the others would swarm through the room, checking out of the bed, in the closets, and through the clothes hamper, everywhere, searching for clothes, toys, or other valuables. The ultimate prize was to find a stash of money. I quickly discovered that it didn't matter whether the thieves needed or even desired the items. Possession of an article, any article, meant trading power for other things, household chores, late-night desserts, or in exchange for money. As usual, I adapted quickly and I joined in the hunt whenever a child left. I learned that rather than walking a child to the car and wishing him or her good luck, I would instead say my goodbyes in Aunt Mary's home and then stay close to the departing child's room so I could have a head start on the other kids. But as a sign of respect, we all knew to never enter a room until the child had left. I also learned that deals were usually made the night before, and as a courtesy, the roommate would get first dibs. So I too would give away a few shirts and a couple toys. As I began to imagine the other foster children ransacking my old room, I heard Mrs. Catans ask, "Well, David, what do you think?" Page 85. Still holding my bag, I shook my head up and down before saying, "It's a very nice house, ma'am." Mrs. Catans waved a finger in my face. "Now, we'll have none of that. Everyone here calls me either Lillian or Mom. You may call me Mom." I again nodded, but this time at both women. I didn't feel comfortable calling Mrs. Catans some lady I just met a few moments ago Mom. As the two ladies chatted for several minutes, Lillian leaned close to Miss Gold, hanging on her every word and shaking her head from side to side. "No contact? None at all?" she asked. "Correct," Miss Gold replied. "David is to have no contact with his mother or his brothers unless Mrs. Pelzer makes the arrangements." "And the father?" Lillian asked. "Not a problem. He has your number. He should be calling you soon." David's father did not make it to the court proceedings, but I've kept him informed of David's status. Mrs. Catans leaned a little closer to Miss Gold. "Anything special I need to know?" "Well," Miss Gold began, "David is still in the adjustment phase. He's a bit hyper and into everything, and I mean everything. He's a bit light-fingered, if you know what I mean." Page 86. Sitting on the couch, I acted as if I were not paying attention, but I could hear every word. "David," Mrs. Catans said, "why don't you wait in the kitchen and I'll be with you in just a few moments." And as I followed Mrs. Catans into the kitchen, I still held on to my grocery bag. And I sat by the table, and I drank a glass of water as Lillian closed the sliding door separating the two rooms. I could hear Mrs. Catans sit back down, but the two women started whispering. I watched the numbers of a clock radio flip over every time a minute passed. Before I knew it, the sliding door opened. Miss Gold smiled at me before giving me a hug. "I really think you're going to like it here," she said. "There's a play park nearby, and you'll have lots of other foster children to play with. I'll check in on you as soon as I can, so be extra good." I gave Miss Gold another quick hug, thinking I'd see her in a few days, and I waved goodbye to her from the upstairs window. Before Miss Gold drove down the street, she waved a final goodbye and then blew me a kiss. I stared through the window, not knowing what to do next. "Well," Mrs. Castan said, "would you like to see your room?" Page 87. My eyes lit up as she shook my hand. "Yes, ma'am." "Remember what I told you," Lillian warned. I nodded my head. "I'm sorry, I forget things sometimes." Mrs. Castans led me into the first room down the hall, and after putting my clothes away, I joined her on the twin-size bed. "I need to explain a few things to you. The home rules. You are responsible for keeping your room clean and helping out with the chores. You do not enter someone else's room without their permission first. There's no lying or stealing in this home, and if you want to go somewhere, you first ask me. And you tell me where and how long you'll be away." "You mean I get to go anywhere I want to?" I asked, amazed that I suddenly had all this unexpected freedom. "Within reason, of course," Lillian responded. "This home is not a prison. As long as you act responsible, you'll be treated as such. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, Mrs. Catans," I said in a soft, slow voice, still feeling awkward calling her mom. Mrs. Catans patted my leg before leaving the room and closing the door. I leaned back on the bed, smelling the fresh, scented pillowcase. I tried, page 88, to focus on the sounds of the cars rushing up and down the steep street, till I finally gave in to sleep. And as my mind began to drift off, I began to feel safe and secure in my new setting. Sometime later, I woke to the sounds of voices coming from the kitchen, and after I cleared my eyes, I walked out of the bedroom and into the kitchen. "Is this him?" Someone with long blonde hair chided. "This ain't no kid. He's a runt." Lillian leaned over and smacked the tall, blonde teenager in the arm. "Larry, now watch your mouth. David, please excuse him. This," she said, still staring at Larry, "is Larry Jr. You'll meet Big Larry in a few minutes." "Come on, Larry. He's small, but he's kind of cute. Hi, I'm Connie, and I don't want you to go through my things in my room. You got that?" As Connie leaned over, I nearly choked on her perfume. She had shiny black hair and long eyelashes, and she wore a mini dress. I couldn't help myself as I stared up at her legs. Connie stepped back, and her face turned red. "Mom, he's a little pervert." I turned to Mrs. Catans. "What's a prevert?" Lillian laughed. "Someone who shouldn't look up young ladies' dresses." Page 89. I didn't understand. I wanted to know what it meant. I began to ask the same question when Mrs. Catans cut me off. "And this is Big Larry." I looked as far up as I could to see a huge man with dark curly hair and black framed glasses. He had a kind, gentle face. Big Larry smiled as he shook my hand. "Mom," he said, "I'm going to go to the show tonight. Mind if I take Dave with me?" Lillian smiled. "I don't mind, but you make sure you take care of him." "Yeah," Larry Jr. chimed. "Make sure he doesn't get scared or see anything that's nasty." About an hour later, Big Larry and I began our journey to the movie theater. I could tell that he was childlike and shy. I liked him immediately. As we walked up and down the endless streets of Daly City, we both talked about things of no importance. Somehow, we each knew not to ask why the other was in foster care. It was a sort of code that was explained to me while I stayed at Aunt Mary's home. The closer we strolled to the theater, the more Big Larry became my friend. Larry claimed to have seen the movie Live and Let Die a dozen times, so I couldn't understand why he so badly wanted to see it again. But after the first 10 minutes of the show, I too sat, paralyzed. Page 90. I became mesmerized by the action scenes, the fast-paced music that carried the film. After years of living in the dark, craving adventure, I finally saw it on film. While Larry gazed at the girls in bikinis, I fidgeted in my seat, waiting impatiently for James Bond to make his next narrow escape from death, while at the same time saving the world from doom. After seeing this movie, the character of James Bond became etched in my mind, much in the same way as Superman had years earlier. The next day was just as special. Rudy, Lillian's husband, loaded their 2 cars full of foster children and mountains of food for their annual 4th of July family get-together picnic at Junipero Sierra Park. Same park I went to as a small boy when I was considered a member of Mother's family. When we arrived at the park, I helped carry containers and bags full of goodies, not knowing where to place them. "What do I do with these?" I asked no one in particular. "David, just place it anywhere," Rudy replied. "But all of the tables are already full of stuff from other people," I whined. Lillian stepped beside Rudy. They joined hands. "Yes, David, we know," she said. "These people are our family." Page 91. I looked at the scores of adults drinking soda and beer. Kids ran in every direction as they played tag. "Wow. All these people are your kids?" Suddenly, a woman screamed. I nearly recoiled into my protective shell as the woman frantically ran toward me in the thick, funny-looking wooden shoes. "Mom! Dad!" the woman howled. She then tried to wrap her arms around both Lillian and Rudy. I stared at her face. She didn't look anything like Mr. or Mrs. Catan's. Lillian cried as she blew her nose, then gave her handkerchief to the woman and closed her eyes for a brief moment to recompose herself. "David, this is one of our first foster children, Kathy." Now I understood. I turned my head from side to side, straining my eyes as streams of people flocked over to Rudy and Lillian. "And, Mom, Dad, I got a job. I'm married. I'm going to night school, and this is my new baby," Kathy announced as a man with a beard handed over a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket into Rudy's open arms. "Oh, Mom, Dad, it's so good to see you," Kathy cried. A small mob of adults crowded around the Catanzas. Swarms of children jumped up and down, screaming for attention, as babies and hugs, page 92, were exchanged. After a few minutes, I excused myself from the crowd, and I made my way to the edge of the hill. I sat down, staring at the planes lifting off from the nearby airport. "Pretty cool, isn't it?" a familiar voice said. I turned to look at Big Larry. "Every year it's the same thing, but more people. I guess you can say they love kids." "So what do you think?" Larry asked. "Wow, there must be hundreds of folks here," I exclaimed. "Have you ever been here before?" "Yeah, last year. How about you?" I stopped for a moment to study a jumbo jet dipping its wing to the west. When I was a kid, I caught myself, not sure if I really wanted to say anything. I held back so much for so long. I cleared my throat before continuing. My parents, my real mom and dad, would always take my 2 brothers and me to this park. When we were just kids, I smiled. It's been the entire day just down the hill, playing on the swing set. I closed my eyes, seeing Ron, Stan, and me as happy, bright-faced kids. I wondered what they were doing now. "Dave." "Hey, David. Earth to Dave. Come in." Larry blared as he cupped his hands together, acting as if they formed into a blowhorn. Page 93. "Sorry," I automatically replied. I think I'll take a walk." After asking permission from Lillian, I strolled down the paved hill. A few minutes later, I found myself standing on the same grassy area as I did a lifetime ago. Back then, I was a member of the perfect family. Now, I was still a child, searching for my past. I walked toward the swing set, sat on one of the black swings. I kicked the sand, filling the heels of my shoes with some of it. My mind began to drift off again. "Hey, mister, are you going to play or what?" a small child asked. I slid off the swing and I walked away. My insides felt hollow. In front of me, beneath a shade of trees, a young couple sat on the same table as Mother and Father did years ago. The woman got up and called out to her children with her hands on her hips, just as Mother had done when she had called to her children. For a second our eyes met, and this lady smiled at me as she bowed her head. As I heard the sounds of children running from the swing set, I closed my eyes, wishing I had the answers to why everything had gone so wrong with Mother and me. The two questions that tumbled over and over, page 94. The two questions that tumbled over and over in my mind were whether Mother ever loved me and why she treated me the way she did. Later that evening, I wanted so badly to talk to Mrs. Catan's, but I couldn't work up the nerve. The next morning, I woke up late and I shuffled into the kitchen. "She ain't here, Runt," Larry Jr. hissed. "You'll have to feed yourself." I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to cook. And I didn't know where the cereal bowls were, or even where the cereal was. "So," Larry Jr. began, "I hear your mother used to kick the crap out of you. Tell me, what's it like? I mean, to have someone use your face for a mop." I couldn't believe this creep. Every time I was with Larry Jr., he was always trying to put me down. I bit my lip, trying to think of something to say. I failed to think of anything smooth. A surge of anger began to race through me. "So tell me, man, what's it like? I mean, I'm curious. Seriously. What's it like to have the crap kicked out of you? Why didn't you fight back? What are you, some sort of wimp?" I turned away from him and I ran to my room. I could hear him laughing behind me as I slammed the door shut. I burrowed into my bed and cried without knowing why. Page 95. I stayed in the room all day. "Mrs. Catan's, am I a wimp?" I asked her the next day as she drove me to the shopping mall. "A wimp? David, where did you hear that?" I did not want to rat on Larry Jr., but he was a turd and I didn't like him anyway. I still felt upset about how he and the other big kids thought of me. I swallowed hard before I answered Lillian. "Pay Larry no mind," Mrs. Catan said afterward. "He's a very upset young man. David, we have quite an array of..." I gave her a puzzled look. "Quite a mixture of young folks who have different special needs. Larry is just at that age where he's rebellious. He wants to fight everything and everyone. Give him a wide berth. Lots of room. He's just filling you out. Give it some time. Okay?" "Yes, ma'am, I understand. But am I a wimp because I don't fight back? I mean, is it right to fight your own mother?" Mrs. Catan shoved the gear shift into park as she stopped in front of Tanner Fran Park. She turned to the right as she took off her glasses. "No, David," she stated matter-of-factly, "you are not a wimp." Page 96. For not fighting back. "I don't know all that happened, but I do know that you're not a wimp. Now come on, I've got a check here for $127 from the county to buy you some clothes. And," Lillian smiled, "I'm not afraid to spend it. Lesson number 1, let's go shopping." As Lillian took my hand, I screeched, "Wow, $127? That's a lot of money. Not for a growing boy. And you do plan on growing, don't you? That's all the money they gave us for this year." "Wait until you have kids of your own," Lillian stated as she opened the door into Sears. A couple of hours and 3 shopping bags later, Lillian and I returned to her home. I smiled from ear to ear as I closed the door to my room. Then I laid out all my clothes as neatly as I could. Next, I arranged the shirts by their colors, and I folded my underwear, briefs, and socks just right before putting them away. I sat by the foot of the bed for a few seconds before I ripped open the drawers and rearranged my clothes again. After the 4th time, I slowly opened the drawers. As gently as I could, I removed a dark blue shirt. My hands trembled. I breathed in the smell of cotton. Yes, I told myself. These are my clothes. Clothes that no one has ever touched or worn before. Page 97. Not rags that Mother had given me or made me wear, or clothes she had given me out of pity that she had stored since last Christmas, or clothes from Aunt Mary that other foster children had worn before. Yes, I squealed out loud. And without thinking, I flung open the drawers, threw everything back on the bed. It took me forever to repack my clothes, but I didn't care. I was having fun. A few days later, before lunch, Lillian hung up the phone in the kitchen before calling me away from the television. So, she asked, how are you feeling today? I shrugged my shoulders. Fine, I guess. My eyes grew wide. Did I do something wrong? Am I in trouble? No, no, she said in a calm voice. Now stop that. Why do you always say that whenever someone asks you a simple question? I shook my head. I understood what she said, but I did not know why I always felt on edge whenever someone asked me a question. I don't know. Lillian nodded. Hey, let's say we have some lunch. I'll kick Larry Jr. out. It'll be just the two of us. All right? Page 98. My face lit up. Sure, I liked it whenever Mrs. Costanza and I were alone, because I felt special. Lillian made a couple of bologna sandwiches as I grabbed a bag of chips. She first warned, and then she ordered me to slow down my eating and to use better table manners. I obeyed her by not seizing everything in sight or shoving food into my mouth. I smiled at her, proving to her that I could indeed chew with my mouth closed. Mrs. Catan seemed to take her time as she delicately ate her sandwich. I almost asked her why she chewed so slow when I heard a loud banging on the door. Without thinking, I blurted, I'll get it. Still chomping on my food, I bolted down the stairs and I opened the door. A split second later, I nearly coughed up my food. My brain locked up. I couldn't break away from looking at her. Well, aren't you going to invite us in? Mother asked in a kind voice. From behind me, I could hear Lillian rush down the staircase. Hello, I'm Lillian Catans. We spoke on the phone today. We were just finishing lunch. You did say 1 p.m., didn't you? Mother asked in a demanding tone. Yes, I did. Please come in, Lillian said. Page 99. Mother marched in, followed by the boys. Stan came in last with a grin on his face as he pushed in my bike, which Grandmother had purchased for me last Christmas. I remember that day when Mother had allowed me to ride the bike twice. I had never ridden before, and I fell several times before I got the hang of it. And at the end of the day, I ran over a nail, and the front tire went flat. Now, as Stan shoved the bike into Lillian's house, I could immediately see that both tires were flat, and parts were missing from the bike. But I didn't care. The yellow and candy apple red Murray bicycle with its metallic red banana seat was my prized possession. I was shocked that Mother decided to give it to me. Mother and the boys only visited for a few minutes, but Lillian made a point to stay by my side. And even though Mother's attitude seemed more relaxed, not cold and demeaning, as when she had come to see me at Aunt Mary's, she still wouldn't talk to me. I had so much to tell her. I wanted to show her my room, my new clothes, and the artwork that I did in school. Above all, I wanted so badly to prove to Mother that I was indeed worthy of her acceptance. Well, Mother said as she got up. Page 100. Couch, I just wanted to drop by. Remember, David, I will be checking in on you from time to time, so you be good, Mother stated in a sly voice. Lillian raised her hand, stopping me before I could say anything. Thank you for stopping by, Mrs. Pelzer. And remember, do call if you drop by again, Lillian replied as Mother stepped to the door. I raced up the stairs, and I stopped in front of a tall window and remained perched behind the glass as I watched Mother and the boys pile into her faded gray station wagon, and as she drove off I waved frantically, but no one saw me. In my heart I knew my effort was in vain. I wished that just once, someone would smile and wave back. Lillian let out a deep sigh and then placed her hands on my shoulders. So that's your mother? Are you all right? I nodded my head yes. I looked up at Lillian. Tears rolled down my face. She doesn't love me, does she? I mean, I just don't understand. Why? Why won't she even talk to me? Am I that bad? Why didn't you tell me she was coming over? Why? I'm tired of her treating me like I'm nothing. I'm tired of her. My brothers, that creep Larry. Page 101. I pointed my finger at the window. She didn't even talk to me. She never talks to me. Never. I spun around to Lillian. Am I that bad? I try to be nice. I try to be good. I didn't tell her to come over, did I? I began to rant and rave, throwing my hands to the air as I paced the living room. Did I tell her to beat me? To not feed me for days? Or have me live and sleep in the garage like an animal? At night, she wouldn't even give me a blanket. Sometimes I got so cold. I tried to stay warm. I really did. I cried as I nodded my head. I wiped my runny nose with my finger, then I closed my eyes. For a brief moment, I saw myself standing in front of the kitchen sink, back at the house, and beside me I could see a smelly pink paper napkin. I took a deep breath before I opened my eyes. I remember one Saturday afternoon she had me pick up some dog poop, and I was in the kitchen, she was in the living room lying down on the couch watching her shows. It's all she does all day, every day, is watch her shows. Anyway, all I had to do was throw the poop in the garbage disposal and she'd never know. I knew if she found out it'd be too late. I mean, by the time she heard me turn on the page 102 disposal, it would be too late. But I ate it because she told me to. As I did, I cried inside. Not because of, but because I had let her do that to me. For all those years, I had let her treat me like she did. For years, I was so ashamed. I began to whimper. I never told. Maybe Larry's right. Maybe I am a wimp. Oh, David. Oh, my God, Lillian cried. We didn't know. Look at this. I yanked up my shirt. This is where she stabbed me. She didn't mean to. It was an accident. But you know why? The blood drained from Lillian's face. She closed her eyes before she covered her mouth with her hand. No, David, I don't know. Why did she? She said she'd kill me if I didn't do the damn dishes in 20 minutes. Ain't that a kick? The funny thing is that ever since the accident, I just wanted to tell her I knew she didn't mean to kill me, that I knew it was an accident. I actually prayed that the accident would bring us together, that somehow she knew she'd gone too far, that she couldn't hide the secret anymore. I wanted her to know that I forgave her. But no, I'm the bad guy. She won't even talk to me. Like I'm the one who's the bad guy. Page 103. I could feel my arms tighten up and my hands form into fists. I stared through Mrs. Catan's as I slowly turned my head from side to side. Damn it, she won't even talk to me. Why? Lillian knelt down in front of me. She was sobbing too. David, I don't know. We need to have you talk to someone who can help you. This is something you need to get out of your system. You need someone who's more qualified, who knows what to do. Miss Gold and I will arrange for you to talk to someone who will help you find some answers. All right? I felt myself drifting away, and I focused on Lillian's mouth moving, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. She took my hand and led me into the room. As I lay in bed, she stroked my hair, whispering, It's all right. I'm right here. Everything's going to be all right. Hours later, I woke up refreshed and followed Miss Catan's as she bounced down the staircase to examine my bike. Moments later, I shook my head in disgust. Stan did this, I said. Mr. Fix-It. It's his way of getting back at me. Well, David, Lillian said in a firm tone, the question is, are you going to sit here and sulk, page 104, about it? Or are you going to do something about it? She stopped for a moment as if to ponder an idea. You know, if you wanted to, you could probably earn some extra money and fix up your bike. That is, if you wanted to. A few minutes later, I walked back up the stairs and I plopped myself on the couch. I now became consumed with fixing my bike. And when Big Larry came home from work, I ran to his room to seek his advice. and throughout the evening Larry and I schemed on the quickest way to achieve my goal. After 10 o'clock, we came up with the perfect plan. A plan so flawless that Larry guaranteed I would have my bike up and running in 30 days or less. Larry, who claimed to be a master strategist, I had no idea what his statement meant. He went on to boast that when Mom and Dad saw me coming, they would willingly throw money at me. Wow, I gasped. This is just too cool. Before quitting for the day, Big Larry and I dubbed our plan Operation Bug the Parent. The following morning, I stayed glued to Lillian's side, begging her for extra work. An hour later, she threw her arms in the air. All right, I give up. Here, take these rags. Clean the bathroom. You do know how to clean a bathroom, don't you? Page 105. I smiled and I said to myself, like you wouldn't believe. As I gazed up at her, I cocked my neck to one side. How much? Lillian blinked her eyes. What? How much to clean the bathroom? I stated in my most serious voice. Mrs. Catans nodded her head. Oh, okay, I understand. Okay, little big man, I'll tell you what. I'll pay you a quarter. But before Lillian could complete her sentence, I replied, No, not enough. Aren't you the greedy one? Okay, how much? I could feel myself retreat inside. Big Larry hadn't taught me what to do in this case. I don't know, I said as I felt all my confidence shrinking away. I'll tell you what, she said, hovering over me. I'll give you 30 cents. Take it or leave it. I knew from what Big Larry had instructed me to do that whenever someone said take it or leave it, it meant I should take the deal and run. I nodded my head triumphantly. It's a deal. Let's shake on it. Looking at Lillian, I could tell she wasn't ready for my high-powered art of deal-making. I felt I had tricked her into not only paying me, but giving me, page 106, more money than she had originally offered. It took me nearly 2 hours to clean that bathroom, and as Mrs. Catans put it, by the employer's standards. I felt that she had somehow taken advantage of me, and as I scrubbed the tile floor for the third time, I knew that evening I would need to talk to Big Larry and complain about our foolproof plan. My mixed feelings suddenly disappeared when Lillian dropped a nickel and a quarter into my eager palm. Forgetting to thank her, I raced into my room, found a jar that I had saved, and I dropped the change into the jar. I stared into that jar every day, and in less than a month I had earned over $4, more than enough, I figured, to fix my bike. Finally, after the right amount of pestering again, Tony, Lillian's son, drove me to the back of his beat-up orange Chevy pickup truck to the bicycle shop. Tony knew, without me bugging him, all the parts I needed. I didn't seem to notice how when the bill arrived, Tony came up with more cash than I had. That day, without permission, I borrowed some tools I had found, and I began to piece my bike together. And after dozens of attempts at forcing the inner tubes into both tires, I wiped off my bloody knuckles, page 107, jumped on my bike, and for the first time in my life, I let out a howl of victory as I breezed down the street without a care in the world. I remember August 21st, 1973 as my day on my bike. That day was the first time I felt I was a normal kid, caught up in the splendor of a never-ending day. For years I'd heard the sounds of kids zooming down the street, screaming with joy as they flew by on their bikes. That day I must have ridden up and down the street 1,000 times. Mrs. Catans had to drag me inside. David Pelzer, it's been dark for over an hour now. Get your little butt in here, now, she barked as I sailed past her in defiance. And even though my legs ached from the strain of pumping my bike up the street, I didn't want my special day to end. And as Lillian stood with her hands on her hips, I jumped off my bike and I puffed all the way as I walked my bike up to her home. I could tell by the look on her face that she was about to yell at me. But I beat her to the punch by giving her my best smile. All right, she said. She threw her arm around me. Get in here. Don't worry, tomorrow's another day. After you're done with your chores, you can take your bike to the park. Page 108. I clenched my fist in victory. Yes, I cried. Earlier the next morning, as I stepped out of bed, I discovered I could barely bend my legs. I looked into the mirror and smiled. Yes. Okay, that's the end of chapter 4. Good times, right, with his bike. Chapter 5, he's going to have some more problems. More problems with some of the foster children at the home, if you can guess who that is. But he's also got friends, and that'll help. Alright, so that's it. We'll be back soon. See ya.